Picture this. You sit down in a luxurious early 1970s Citroën SM, and in front of you, a steering wheel with just one single spoke, positioned not straight down, but at an angle. Strange? Absolutely. Or take another example. The Pagani Zonda R supercar, where a tachometer sits right in the center of the steering wheel. And finally, the famous Mercedes 190e, equipped with only one lonely wiper, sweeping back and forth all by itself. Why would engineers deliberately break symmetry in such critical control elements? Was it designer whimsy or calculated engineering? Let's find out. No fluff, just facts and the most curious details. Let's start with the Citroën, the brand that loved breaking conventions like no one else. In the legendary 1955 DS, the French introduced the world's first single-spoke steering wheel, a design later inherited by the sporty Citroën SM in 1970. It looked futuristic, one elegant spoke stretching diagonally from the steering column to support the rim. And when the wheels were straight, the spoke wasn't vertical. It sat at roughly the 7 o'clock position on left-hand drive cars, mirrored to 5 o'clock on right-hand drive ones. It gave the impression the wheel was bent or misaligned, but Citroën had solid reasoning behind this quirk. First, safety. In the 1950s, there were no seatbelts or airbags, and in a frontal collision, the driver risked being impaled on the steering column. Citroën's engineers found an elegant solution. They bent and offset the column slightly to one side, while the curved single spoke was shaped to deflect impact. In a crash, the driver's body would slide sideways away from the rigid shaft, toward the safer center of the cabin. If the chest still hit the wheel, it would strike either the rim, which could flex being attached at only one point, or the curved spoke, which distributed the impact instead of concentrating it. Simply put, it's better to crash into a bent tube than into a steel skewer, which was exactly what most classic steering wheels resembled back then. Second, instrument visibility. A single thin spoke instead of 2 or 3 meant a clear, unobstructed view of the gauges. The driver of a DS or SM could see the speedometer and dials perfectly. No need to peer between spokes. In an era of small analog instruments, that genuinely improved ergonomics. And of course, style. The one-spoke wheel became a Citroën signature, giving its interiors a cosmic, almost spaceship-like feel. Back in 1955, the DS looked as if it had landed from the future, and that single spoke played a big part in its aura. At first, the public joked about French eccentricity, but the asymmetry turned out to be a thoughtful, functional design. It's no wonder the enthusiasts ranked the DS's steering wheel among the most ingenious ever made. Later, with the arrival of collapsible columns and airbags, even Citroën abandoned the one-spoke layout. By the 1980s, more traditional designs prevailed, yet the legend of the one-armed wheel still fascinates car lovers. Now, jump from the past to the modern era of hypercars, where rules are meant to be challenged again. Italian master Horacio Pagani is famous for turning cars into pieces of art and never shying away from unconventional ideas. His creation, the Pagani Zonda R, a track-only monster built in tiny numbers, became famous not just for lap records, but for one extraordinary cabin detail. The tachometer sits right in the steering wheel's hub, spinning together with it. Yep, instead of being mounted on the dashboard, a giant rev counter is embedded into the wheel itself. That's truly unique. No other production car, even in the loosest sense, has done this. Why? Let's try to understand Pagani's logic. The Zonda R is a purebred track machine. No luxury, just bare carbon, a roll cage, no aircon, nothing superfluous. Everything serves weight reduction and speed. At its heart lies an AMG 6.0-liter V12, screaming to the heavens with over 750 HP. The tachometer, then, is the car's pulse. By placing it directly in the driver's hands, Pagani seems to say, "Here's the car's heart. Hold it." On the track, keeping the revs in the perfect range is vital, and a large, centered tachometer makes that easier, at least when the wheel is straight. Of course, this is more about theater and obsessive craftsmanship than practical necessity. Reading a spinning dial mid-turn isn't exactly easy, but it's a brilliant flourish that fits the Zonda R's character. Pagani's obsession with detail means every part must amaze, so the Zonda R impresses not only with numbers, but with touches like the retro-futuristic scattering of gauges across the cabin. And the tachometer on wheel isn't just a showpiece. The Zonda R, equipped exactly like this, set the Nürburgring record for non-production cars in 2010. So the questionable readability clearly didn't slow the driver down. In short, the asymmetry and eccentricity here perfectly suit the machine's soul. Pagani made sure his creation stood apart and literally put the car's heartbeat in the driver's hands. We all know perfectly well that when talking about brilliant engineering solutions, you simply can't ignore the Germans. Now, let's talk about that lonely wiper blade on the windshield. In 1982, Mercedes-Benz introduced the new 190e, the W201, and with it, a technology called the mono wiper. Instead of the usual pair of synchronized blades, there was just one, sweeping dramatically from side to side, covering nearly the entire windshield. It looked minimalist, elegant even. One roaring arm instead of two antennae, but it would have been a silly gimmick if it weren't for its genuine engineering purpose. You see, the Germans weren't the first to try a single wiper. Earlier cars like the sporty VW Scirocco, some Fiats, and even Jaguars used a similar setup. But those older systems were crude. A single blade moved in a fixed arc, leaving untouched corners. Mercedes, however, developed a unique eccentric mechanism. Instead, the base of the wiper was a cam system that made the arm extend outward during its sweep and retract as it returned. Thanks to this, the blade's path widened dramatically. It reached the upper corners of the windshield almost as effectively as two blades would. On diagrams, its motion looked like a graceful dance. The wiper stretched and folded, tracing an elegant octopus pattern across the glass. The result? Record-breaking coverage up to 86% of the windshield area cleared with one stroke. For comparison, many traditional dual wiper systems barely exceed that figure. The main advantage? Aerodynamics. At autobahn speeds, one tightly pressed wiper created less air resistance than two. Fewer turbulent swirls meant less noise and slightly better airflow. Every detail mattered when you were cruising at around 125 miles per hour on a German highway. There was also a potential weight benefit, one mechanism instead of two, though in practice the complex cam drive probably offset that. Mercedes proudly called the mono wiper simplicity through complexity. One blade instead of two, but executed with genius. Of course, there were drawbacks. The mechanism was expensive to produce and maintain. It actually contained more parts than a conventional dual linkage. Owners weren't thrilled to learn the price of replacing the drive motor. It also required a long, specialized wiper blade that wasn't always easy to find. Assumingly, the motor and linkage were so strong that, at full speed, the system could slightly shake the car. That's how energetically this one-armed wonder swung across the glass. Still, it was mesmerizing to watch. Many owners admitted they couldn't take their eyes off it in the rain. The single wiper seemed to dance across the windshield, stretching and folding back with hypnotic precision. Mercedes used the mono wiper system for years. The 190e, the larger W124 E-Class, its coupes, its wagons, and later on the first C-Class, the W202, and E-Class, the W210. But by the early 2000s, it quietly disappeared. Most likely, cost efficiency won over. Two simple wipers were cheaper and easier to service. Advances in materials also made conventional blades more effective. And with lower hood designs, high-speed airflow caused less lift. So the asymmetric wiper went down in history as a fascinating chapter, a reminder that in pursuit of technical perfection and pure engineering ideals, Mercedes dared to break symmetry. We've looked at just 3 examples, but such ideas appeared in many other cars. Sometimes it was function over form, like the central driver's seat in the McLaren F1, another deliberate asymmetry done for perfect weight balance. Sometimes it was style, like the asymmetrical body of the Nissan Cube, or the Hyundai Veloster with its 2-in-1 door layout. Each story reflects a quest for unconventional solutions. Engineers and designers who broke symmetry risked criticism, confusion, even ridicule. Yet it's precisely these bold moves that make the automotive world fascinating. Symmetry can feel like a cozy cage, safe, familiar, but sometimes dull. The heroes of our story, Citroën with its one-spoke steering wheel, Pagani with its tachometer on the wheel, and Mercedes with its monowiper, proved that breaking symmetry can serve a higher purpose. Without such experiments, there would be no progress. So next time you spot a car with some odd detail, a lonely wiper or a chopped-off steering wheel, remember, behind that quirk might lie a stroke of genius. Engineers didn't break symmetry out of whimsy, but to make cars safer, smarter, or simply more charismatic. And we, as car enthusiasts, only gained from it, because now we have more stories to tell and more marvels to admire.